And I will speak about the relationship between the Austrian social democracy and also social democrats with the social democrats in Yugoslavia, or in the region that has later on become Yugoslavia, in the period between, let's say, 1900 until the end of the First World War. And actually this communication, this relation, there were many and very frequent. Actually, I will start with one personality who was, let's say, the most important and most charismatic personality of Serbian social democracy at that time, and it was Dimitrije Tucovic. And I will begin actually by the end. I will begin with the eulogy that Karl Renner wrote in 1915 in their journal, Der Kampf, the battle that they had. It was a eulogy on, in the war, fallen Dimitrije Tucovic. He was killed in the battle in 1915. And Karl Renner mentions in this eulogy that he met Tucovic in Copenhagen on the conference of the Second International. And he said, many Austrian comrades and the delegates of the Copenhagen Congress 1910 will remember Tucovic's towering, youthful and heartwarming appearance. He had a warm personal friendship with the editors of the Kampf. It was funny, actually, because Tucovic never wrote in Kampf. It is not that he didn't want to. It is that he wasn't allowed to. And let us now hear why. Actually, in 1908, Otto Bauer develops a concept of nationalities and how to solve this tremendous problem of rising nationalities within the Austrian Empire. And Bauer declares, actually has a concept to solve it, and this is the concept of the cultural and personal autonomy, which was not bound territorially, so that one nationality gets one territory and then is autonomous there, but actually it was a very cosmopolitic idea of national autonomy. So that actually, I can be a Czech or Slovak living in Vienna and have political autonomy, my representation in parliament and so on and so on. But actually at the Balkans, and especially in Slavic part of the empire, that was not enough, and that was actually the opinion of many. So basically this Slavic part always pressed to the tripartite system, so that the Austrian monarchy was not divided, let's say, between Hungary and Austria, but pressed actually for a Slavic part of the empire. So for the and so the problem emerged between a Serbian social democrats and Dimitrije Tucovic was their leader, as Austria annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina and in 1908. So Tucovic actually said that it was break of the international law. Tucovic was very, very upset about it, and he thought it is actually an act of imperialism. And he said that Austria now, at that time, poses a danger of being an imperialist country in the same level like Tsarist Russia. So, and he thought actually that Austrian comrades like Otto Bauer, Karl Renner and comrades did not react enough to prevent it, that they did not really react enough in the parliament and so on, and he accused them of it in several letters. And the problem is that he accused them of it even at the conference in Copenhagen. he actually wanted to publish his, he wrote a journal article about that, because he was of the opinion that Bosnia and Herzegovina should decide plebiscitary about its future, and that its future should not be decided in Vienna. And he wanted to publish this article of his. Nota bene to mention, he established a journal in Belgrade, a social democratic journal called Borba, and Borba means der Kampf, the struggle. So he was really looking up to the Kampf and to Austrian Social Democrats, and was very disappointed that they did not share his views about Bosnia and Herzegovina. And Tucovic at the Congress in Copenhagen of the Second International accuses the Austrian Social Democracy for not having worked for the self-determination of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but to work actually on self-determination within the monarchy. But they did not envisage the idea that this self-determination might be outside of the monarchy. But he is not a Serbian nationalist. And Serbian, because many criticized in Serbia, Austria, because they wanted actually Bosnia to get to Serbia, but he was not that kind of nationalist. He actually criticized Serbian militarism towards Bosnia as well, and say that Bosnia can only build its independence by itself and from below. And actually, he said following, that the struggle of Austrian comrades actually rushed to their aid, but they did organize a very strong campaign about the war cheats in Serbia, about the Karađorđević dynasty and so on, but it was, he admits, it was also not enough from the Serbian social democracy as well. So basically he criticized his own social democracy as Austrian social democracy on the question of Bosnia. Karl Renner did not leave that unanswered. He said, "I say on behalf of Austrian and Hungarian social democracy and on behalf of international social democracy that we all agree that peoples have the right to self-defense and to decide on what their future would be. On the question of Balkan policy, practically all Austrian and Hungarian socialists were in agreement. We demanded the autonomy of the Bosnian people. As for the press, we fought against the Austrian-Hungarian robbery policy and we fought for peace. Adler got the whole parliament outraged as we stated our point of view. We fought imperialism of Austria, but the entire European and American press seemed to believe that Austria was so weak militarily that the Balkans people could easily have been victorious in the case of war. We have dispelled this illusion and thereby averted the great danger. We are neither the servants of the Habsburgs, nor the friends of Karađorđević, nor the vassals of Montenegro. We want the peoples to govern themselves, and that is why we have simply called for universal suffrage for them within the Austrian monarchy." What has confused people's minds is the complexity of the Balkan problem, which can be looked at from very different angles. It is possible that we invoked the Berlin Treaty in our press, but in this case we invoked it as a fact and not as a right. A socialist should never recognize a contract that is the result of violence. We only recognize the living right to exist of all peoples. That was the answer of Karl Renner to Tucovic at the Congress in Copenhagen. And that ends there in 1910. Tucovic never gains an opportunity to publish his article in Der Kampf, and Karl Kautsky answers, Tucovic then writes letters to him. And he really wants to publish this article, but Kautsky tells him no, he cannot publish this article in Der Kampf because his German is not good enough. It is really funny because I wrote the original letters of Tucovic on Kautsky, and I must admit it has several, let's say, failures in the grammatical article and in the cases, but nothing that normal copy editor of a journal could not actually iron. So I think that it was hardly the reason that he was not published, because I also wrote letters of other people who did publish, and their German was no better, I must say. Some of them even wrote to Kautsky in French, so that speaks of the level of their German. And some of these people are, for example, they're very interesting biographies. For example, Živojin Bulagdzic. Actually, before I started this research, I never heard about this man. He was a journalist and diplomat, studied law in Belgrade and Geneva. He sent letters in French to Kautsky, and he was the representative of the Serbian Social Democracy on the International Socialist Congress in 1893 in Zurich. He was, for example, one of these people who had a general connection with Kautsky and wrote letters to him. He lived until 1941. Basically, we don't know what happened in the meantime with him. Then certain Vasa Stajic, also friend of Kautsky, who was actually a very active social democrat until 1980. And all these people, basically, who wrote to Kautsky, who wrote in their Kampf, disappear from the screen in 1918. Very few of them continue their political careers, and if they do, it is mostly in a very well arrangement with the kingdom with the Karađorđević and the kingdom of Yugoslavia. So basically, they cease being real social democrats and go into the bourgeois careerness and so on. And actually, it is very interesting that instead of Tucovic, another person gets opportunity to publish in Kampf 4 times. And this person is called Demetrović Juraj from Zagreb. Because Kautsky also answers to Tucovic that he thinks that he's a Serbian, so he is not invited to speak about Bosnia and Herzegovina. There are other colleagues, says Kautsky, other colleagues within Austrian, Hungarian social democracy who can better deal with this problem. And I suppose he thought about Demetrović Juraj from Zagreb, because Demetrović Juraj published 5 articles in their Kampf. The first in 1908, Dualismus or Trialismus. Then in 1911, the development of the South Slavic question. In 1912, the South Slavs and the world politics. And in 1918, at the very end of the war, the Balkans in the World War. So he was obviously very, very regarded in high esteem by the editors of the Kampf. And he has actually a very interesting biography. After 1918, in this last article of his in the Kampf, he is very confident that the social democracy will now flourish in Yugoslavia, that it will be one of the leading parties and so on. And then he himself actually establishes a social democratic party of Croatia and Slavonia. But in the times, in 1990, he establishes independent democratic party of the kingdom of SAS, which exists between 1924 and 1929. But very soon he becomes a member of the Yugoslav Kingdom Parliament and Constituent Assembly of the Kingdom. he really made a career. He then becomes a royal governor for Croatia and Slavonia. He is the royal governor in the coalition in 27 and 29. 29, he becomes a minister in the government of Petar Živković. He held, in the entire 30s, he held ministerial position in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia and organized then on Yugoslav National Party, which was very far away from any social democracy. Interestingly, he lived in Serbia during the World War II, and he was an accomplice of the occupiers. And he was shot dead in 1945 by the partisans for being a traitor and a collaborator. So that's how he ended it. Really interesting career. And actually, we have let's go back to what happened to the Austrian social democracy and Serbian social democracy. Actually, they Dimitrije Tucović finds some middle way with Austrian social democracy, and they were reconciled through the mediation of Edpin Kristijan. And Edpin Kristijan was the member of the Austrian social democracy because he was from Slovenia. So Slovenia was Austria. So he actually was at the core of the members of the Austrian social democracy, and he really worked on reconciliation of the Serbian social democracy with the Austrian one. So he organized, actually the Serbian social democracy organized in 1909, in May of 1909, a meeting in Belgrade. That was their party congress, but on the fringes of that party congress, they invited the comrades from Austria, and the people who took floor were Karl Renner, Nemec, Edpin Kristijan, and the other representatives of Czech and Slovenian section of the Austrian party as a whole. So it was, let's say, some kind of reconciliation through the intermediary Edpin Kristijan. Edpin Kristijan was a Slovenian social democrat, but he was a leader of the party, and he arrived at Vienna as a journalist in the early 1900s and get in touch with the socialism. He was on editorial board of the Arbeiterzeitung from 1895 to 1901. Actually, he was one of the really first social democrats in Slovenia, and but after 1918 and the upcoming of Kingdom of Yugoslavia, he emigrated to United States of America in 1920. In 1922, with the marginalization of social democrats in Yugoslavia, he emigrated to United States. What is very important to mention that from the early from 1992, actually the social democracy in Yugoslavia disappears from the stage, and the organization of the workers is now taken almost entirely by the Yugoslav Communist Party. And this is, so to say, like this breaking point. Very powerful social democrats that were very, very organized and powerful and really led like working people before the First World War, disappear from the stage and communists take over. So we don't have social democrats almost entirely in the 20s, in the 30s, and after that. And this is very actually interesting because many of the social democrats, earlier social democrats from the time before the First World War, these that published in their Kampf, that were very active, actually after they get their own national state, they forgot about social democracy entirely. They have become nationalists. So actually, probably social democracy was a tool for them to achieve the purpose of their own nationalism. As soon as it was achieved, they became a free, really like virulent nationalists. The one of them who also wrote in Der Kampf in 1918 was Topalović Živko. Topalović Živko was the president of Social Democrats of Yugoslavia, and he later became Chetnik in the Second World War. He was one of the really like closest friends and advisors of the Chetnik fascist Serbian leader Draža Mihajlović. He escaped certain death in Yugoslavia because he was lucky enough to go to Italy in 1944 as allies. British and American allies withdrew their support from Chetniks because they realized they were fascist German collaborators. He went with a delegation to Rome to try to actually persuade allies to continue supporting Chetniks and not communists. And allies actually detained him in Italy, and this is how he escaped certain conviction of death in 1945 as the closest collaborator of Draža Mihajlović. And this is where I will conclude this lecture. And thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions, I will be very glad to answer them.
I have a question regarding the extensive Renner quote which you gave. It was so quick. What was the sense? What was Renner's position towards Dutrovic?
Renner's position was that he was actually pissed off, but because he was really angry that Tucovic brought it to Copenhagen and not, let's say, in couloirs or something. It was like very open disagreement. And Renner said basically that Austrian social democracy did support Serbian colleagues in their quest actually to help Bosnia get their autonomy. But he never spoke about independence.
So practically he said, we occupy Bosnia, and we Social Democrats make sure that they have within the
within the occupation the same rights like everyone, like this idea like Czechs, like maybe tripartite position that they will not remain as a colony but be fully integrated in the monarchy. But actually, of course, he said that they were against. He said on several occasions that they were against this occupation. But now that this occupation, and that they said it very clearly, that they were against annexion and against occupation, but nevertheless they also spoke about the Treaty of Berlin, like because Treaty of Berlin gave Austria the mandate actually to overtake Bosnia. The problem is that they really said we are against occupation, but when the occupation finally happened, they said, okay, let's do the best what we can. Let's help them to build their country somehow and so on. And this was the main clash point between Tucovic and them.
Now, it just came to my mind such a question. What surprised me is that turn of former Social Democrats to the kind of ultranationalism in the occupation era, and maybe that was given by the fact that there was no bourgeois national form of socialism in Yugoslavia, because in the Czech case there was a so-called National Socialist Party being established at the very end of the 19th century as the opposition to the Social Democratic Internationalism. And it was a democratic force based on some bourgeois assumptions of socialism. And my question is, was there any kind of similar party in the interwar or pre-war Yugoslavia and in the Balkan sphere? Was there only
First World War or Second World War?
Before Second World War.
Yeah, but actually it is interesting because the most crucial moment for the social democracy was in Yugoslavia, or what is later to become Yugoslavia, was the end of the First World War and the creation of the kingdom of Serb, Slovenians and Croats. Because before, you had this Croatian part of social democrats, they are under Austria, have very good rights, but not tripartite. They are under Hungary, and they do not want to be under Hungary, of course. So they actually, in Croatia, they fight for independence. They hope for a Slavic unity, they hope for a Slavic country, and so on. Very soon, they will be disappointed by this Slavic unity, and the point of disappointment was the occupation of Rijeka by Fiume, Rijeka, that we spoke last night, by the Nuncio and Ardits. So, and the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, King Alexander, did nothing to support the Croats as Arditi fell in. Actually, he got a mandate for Rijeka, and he did nothing. As Arditi fell in, he did nothing. The Kingdom of Italy had to expel Arditi out of Fiume. Not King. He didn't even try to get it back, let's say, in Saint-Germain, blah, blah. Nothing. He did nothing. And that was where Croatians for the first time became aware that the Serbian king, is not prepared actually to do much for them. And this is the moment that actually disappointment, and this disappointment will go on. But many of the past social democrats of Croatia managed to arrange themselves with the new system of the kingdom, and to really achieve good careers, because there were people, like Serbs could not rule. The dynasty of Karađorđević could not rule Croatia and Slovenia absolutistically. They did have to give concessions to Croats. Otherwise they would split. Otherwise there would be a civil war long before. So these concessions they gave to Croat nationalism, these people, former social democrats from Croatia, they were the elites of this system. So, and the Serbs, before the First World War, Serbia was a principality, then kingdom. And their social democrats actually became very, very much involved. They were really happy that they now had that their imperialism was victorious after the World War. So now they had to rule a much bigger country, more influential, and they all arranged with the system. None of them, let's say, lost another word about working people, about their condition, which were terrible under the King Alexander. King Alexander was an absolutist who really cut all the rights of the workers he only possibly could. And only who really stood against that were communists. So workers lost their faith in social democracy absolutely, because their leaders actually arranged with this despotical king, and the only who really fought for them and were forbidden by the same king were communists. So between two world wars, you don't have social democracy because the workers did not trust them absolutely. They did not represent workers at all. So they didn't have a legitimacy to speak about workers. That's why there is no social democracy between two world wars. They all arranged with King Alexander.
And there is no a continuity between social democracy and communist party?
No.
There is no?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
There were completely different players.
Mm-hmm.
And these players of the Communist Party, they start to surge with 1920-22.
Mm-hmm.